And welcome to this edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns here, coming to you on Tuesday when the Cardinals have introduced a new president of baseball operations, Chaim Bloom. We knew that day has been coming for a year, but it is official now that Chaim has taken over running the club as John Mozeliak has retired after 18 years in that job. Mike, you watched the introductory press conference on Tuesday. What, I guess, your first takeaways and your reaction, and then we'll move on to specific conversation about everything Chaim had to say.
There are lots of things to say, right? There are lots of takeaways, but I think the first and the key most important thing is this is not John Mozeliak's club anymore. It's going to be a very different voice and a very different opinion in the way he goes about things. And I think there's two takeaways from that, right? Number one is he says all the right things. He's very polished. He knows what to do and how to present well. So you leave that feeling good about the team, even though he didn't tell you any actual information today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can tell he knows what he's doing because he didn't tell you anything, right? That's the purpose of being a president of baseball operations, I think.
But I think the biggest takeaway from Chaim's standpoint is he has proven success in building and developing minor league systems. You look at the way that they did it in Tampa and Boston, and he was in Tampa longer building that minor league system. So I think we're going to get there. But, I think the main message today was there's no timeline on this rebuild. Whatever makes sense for the club is going to be the order. None of them really use the word rebuild or, tear down type thing, right? Bill said they're not going to throw everything away and start from scratch. So it'll be very interesting to see the process and what happens the next few days.
They just say we have, talent on this team. We have more talent coming, but they did use the word long-term as opposed to short-term, that all the decisions that they're going to make going forward. And you and I think most of those decisions will be affecting the roster of that major league club will be based on what's the best for the long term. Now, you can have your own definition of what long-term means. Does that mean 2028? Does that mean 2030? To be determined, but as opposed to what happens in 2026, I guess.
And I think that really depends on a few key moves, right? Who are the right guys to trade to get what guys back, right? We don't know what free agents are out there. I mean, we know what free agents are out there yet, but we don't know kind of how everything's going to shake out until the end of the season. But I think we know that we're going to be looking for a starting pitcher. That's probably done via free agency instead of trade. But as you try to trade guys to fit holes, right? Do you trade Herrera to find a hole, there? There's lots of gaps to fill, essentially, right? Lots of projects to move around. What is the right answer? It's hard to say at this point in time, right?
Yeah, and I think we talked before. I think basically every player on the roster is probably eligible to be included in some level of trade conversations, because you never say never until you hear what somebody's going to offer you. If somebody's going to offer you a crazy trade for one of your better prospects, I think you have to consider it. So I think they'll be open, and he did use the word opportunistic, which of course is one of John Mozeliak's favorite words to as you sit here and react to trades. But I don't think you can say automatically what's going to happen and who's going to be traded and who's not going to be traded, simply because every one of those decisions is going to be an independent decision and made separately as far as what it means toward building, and improving the ball club. Who can we trade to get something better than what we have, who, fits more of our needs, clears up some of the log jam with, too many left-handed hitting middle infielders, too many, left-handed hitting outfielders. I mean, we both can see where the redundancies are on the roster. And if we can see it, Chaim Bloom can see it. And that's kind of going to be the areas that I think they're going to attack first.
And I think the question is how we attack those areas, right? Because we look at other clubs and think, how can we replicate what they're doing, right? For example, let's look at the last series against the Cubs, right? Wilson Contreras has 20 home runs on our team, right? He's not your 3-hole hitter, but he is on our team. The Cubs have 3 players, and that all hit home runs against us in that one game, that have over 30 home runs. So But I'm saying there's your difference right there, right? So your 3, 4, 5 hitters need to be guys that are 30 home run guys, not guys that are 20 home run guys. So I think that's where, when you say, oh, don't trade Alec Burleson, Burleson's not a 30 home run guy. Is he a 20? Yeah. But, I think you could move that around. Is Herrera a 30 home run guy? We don't know. Maybe. And I think that's a question mark. So I think as you make trades, they're looking for that next power hitter in the middle of this lineup. And whatever Donovan, Nootbaar, Burleson that helps us get that, I think they'll make that move.
And the Cubs had 20 home runs in 5 games at Wrigley Field. There's 6 games at Wrigley Field, by the way. So yeah, that was a big difference between these two clubs. I think the other interesting thing is, he talked about the talent coming in the minor league system. I don't know if they've got that guy. I mean, Joshua Baez at Springfield is probably the best, home run hitter they have. Maybe Raniel Rodriguez in Palm Beach and Peoria, but he's an 18-year-old kid, so you can't count on him being any time soon coming up to the big league. So for them to go out and find that 30 home run guy, I think it's going to be a trade or a free agent. I don't think they have that guy on the team or in the system right now.
And we heard Mo talk about it yesterday. Kind of, we've had that big star player the whole time he's been here. It's been McGuire. It's been Matt Holliday. It's been Pujols. It's been Yachty. But these last few years, we didn't have that player step up. And that's not a knock on Goldschmidt or Arenado, but they were hoping they would be that guy, and neither one has been. So the pieces that we're producing in the minors aren't helping support that, right? For example, when we look at these guys like JJ Weatherholt, that's going to be here sooner rather than later, he's going to be a nice addition to this, but he's not a 30 home run hitter.
Yeah, and they did talk about, though, how that the strength of this team and organization has always been, and they want to continue to be, to draft and develop. They're going to put an emphasis on the not only the draft, but signing international free agents as amateurs, and then building them up through the organization. That's how they want this organization to be built, and that unfortunately is not a quick fix. I mean, that's not something that's going to happen overnight. Liam Doyle, who was the left-handed pitcher they drafted out of Tennessee first round last year, he may be an exception to the rule about how quickly he gets to the big leagues. But by and large, even Weatherholt will be here in 2 years, which is still, very, very, short development in the minor leagues. But especially if you're talking about developing high school players or, 17 or 18-year-old international free agents, those guys aren't going to come overnight.
And we can look at Jordan Walker as an example, right? Because he probably could have benefited from a little bit more development down there before he came up. And then when he did come up, he was kind of handled wrong. So I think that's one of the key pieces that Chaim doesn't want to do yet, is call somebody up too early to create that problem. But we needed a right-handed bat, which is where Jordan had to come up probably quicker than he should have. So how they handle finding a right-handed bat, how they handle finding a 30 home run hitter, how they handle finding a number 1 or 2 starter. There's a lot of questions to fill this offseason. It's going to be busy.
Yeah, he did say, though, that if there's debate about which direction to make a move, they're going to decide on the you're going to go on the side of long term as opposed to short term. So, I think that, basically you're probably, if you're a fan sitting here taking away from what he said today, is probably don't expect much difference as far as the actual on-field results. There'll be some different personnel on the field, but I wouldn't expect, the on-field results to be much different in 2026 than they were this year.
And there's 2 takeaways from that point, right? One is he did make the comment that additional investments will be made in player performance and development. And that's where they've been dumping a lot of money so they can start to recoup this and rebuild this system. And some of those pieces went in place last offseason. And so it just takes a while for the system to develop, right? We've seen that happen. The other takeaway is this team didn't miss the playoffs by much. So if you're wanting a competitive team, you don't need to do a whole lot to put a competitive team on the field. You go out and find a number 1 or number 2 starter, and you're really going to make the difference, You
also would think that the young players, the Victor Scotts, the other young players, Herrera's, that those got Burleson, they got all that experience this year. You'd have to think that if they are players that this club is going to try to build around going forward based on win, then that they will benefit from this year's experience, and you maybe can expect better results from them on the field next year than you saw this year.
Definitely. And I think that, there's a couple ways that you can look at some of this too. Like, you look at a couple years ago, we spent $25 million signing Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn, and we got a lot of innings out of them, and they pitched great and they helped our ball club. But if we can develop that talent, then you can spend that $25 million a year on a 30 home run hitter. So I think that's where some of those guys like Herrera, Burleson, are they able to get you that starting pitcher without spending that free agent money, and then you can find a big right-handed bat somewhere.
I thought this was something interesting that Chaim said today. It was right, actually, basically early in his prepared remarks. We are not where we want to be. We are not where we need to be. We are not where our fans expect us to be. we are not where we ourselves expect us what we expect ourselves to be. So I thought those were kind of telling comments that he knows how much work there is to do, and he's ready to get after it.
And it certainly felt like from both the DeWitts and from Chaim, they understood that this is not where they want to be and not where they want to go. And the fans, they understood the fans' message of not going to these games. Bill III talked a lot of bit about, this new entertainment district and certain things to try to build that up. But he did say, first and foremost, we know the fans' attendance is related to the product on the field. And so I think they understand this is going to be a lot of work, and nobody was willing to commit to a time frame of how long this is going to take either.
But I don't think they know the answer to that. I think it depends on how fast the young players develop, and you can't put a timetable on that because you don't know. It just depends. 2 years ago when Jordan Walker made this club as a rookie, you expected better results. I mean, based on what he had done in the minor leagues, what he had done that spring. So if you would have thought the timetable would have been faster than it's been, you just don't know.
And I think the difference between that last offseason and this offseason too is we weren't making the phone calls saying, hey, Burleson's available, hey, Donnie's available, like we're going to this season. So is that going to change the return and the talent that comes back to you,
Mm-hmm. And also, of course, where you are payroll-wise too, yeah.
It's not a mid-season trade of Eric Fetty and Tommy Pham. That's not happening, right? The only trades we're going to make are long-term prospects back that are high-level prospects or high-quality starting pitching or high-quality bats. We're not going to make moves just to make a move, I don't think.
I want to point out that we have stories up on STLSportsPage.com about both John Mosalik's press conference on Monday and Chaim Bloom's press conference on Tuesday. Both of those stories also have links to the complete audio of the two press conferences. If you'd like to listen in and you didn't get a chance to catch them live, the audio is available on the website. You can listen in and form your own opinions about what both those guys had to say. As John, as he said his thank yous and his goodbyes, and of course, Chaim, as he takes over. You can also, of course, subscribe to our newsletter, which will have all the details as well of everything that was said. And of course, keep you posted on every move that comes up this winter. And Mike, as you mentioned, it's going to be a busy winter, I think.
It's going to be a very busy winter. And I think the other takeaway, too, is that there will be changes to this roster. What they'll be, we don't know. He said there will be hard decisions to make. And so you can view that however you see fit, right? But the other thing, too, that came out of this is Ollie will be back next year. There will be some changes to the coaching staff. We don't know what that is. But I think by and large, everyone has their opinion on how Ollie handled a lot of things this season, but he can only do so much with the players and the talent that he has. So I think if we're fixing that first, then maybe we'll see some alternatives in there. We don't know what the coaching staff changes are going to be, but there will be some, it sounded like.
He left the door open to that, saying they have to sort out some things with some of the personnel on-field personnel at the major league level. So we will see how that all shakes down. And I think that bringing Marmol back probably makes sense. He is under contract for 2026. If you don't expect this club really to be much different record-wise, why pay two managers to do that? Also, of course, the uncertainty about what's going to happen in 2027, I think, plays into that decision as well. And it basically gives Chaim a little more time to evaluate. I mean, even though he was in the organization the last 2 years, spent most of his time, kind of concentrating on the minor league level and the player development, was around the big league club more, especially toward the end of the season. But I think he's going to have a different feel for everything that goes on at the big league level when he's actually sitting in that big chair than the last couple of years.
I'll be curious to see how quick he kind of dives in and how quick he starts to make some of these changes and who's the first domino to fall. The one interesting takeaway that I saw, I guess he talked to a handful of people after the press conference, was that he's not opposed to having Nolan Arenado here still. He said he'd be happy to have him. So, that kind of maybe changes some viewpoints too, because then do you look to trade a guy like Nolan Gorman or, Thomas Sajaci or somebody that may end up in that third base, middle infield slot if there's no room for him and Arenado's still here?
Well, don't you think he has to say that, though? Because even though we think he's going to try to trade him and that we're going to eat part of that contract, I think you don't want to back yourself into a corner like happened a year ago and say he's definitely priority A, 1, 2, and 3, and then they never traded him. So I think
that's where I circle back to the first comment I said. Is Chaim is very polished and knows what to say. Now, whether that's going to be just as transparent as Mo is sometimes. I think that's the one thing that media, and you included, would say about Mo is that you had access, right? He gave you, the ability to talk to him, and he would answer questions. He didn't shy away from that. So I'll be curious to see how Chaim handles the same questions. But I agree with your point. You can't be backed in a corner and say Arenado's the only move we have to make, and then you don't make it.
They also did say, Bill DeWitt Jr. said at the news conference that he and Chaim had not really talked about payroll for next year. And I take that at face value, what it's worth. But I don't know that they probably can, because, again, it kind of all depends on what these moves are. If you have to eat part of the contract to trade Arenado, that changes how much money you can spend. If you're able to trade Sonny Gray and not have to take on any of that contract, that changes the equation. So I think that's probably true, that they probably have some parameters. They probably know basically what the payroll is going to be, but he also said we're going to give him the resources that he wants to do what he needs to do. So we'll see.
I think my takeaway from the payroll comment was they want this team to compete next year. So if there's a player that makes sense for them to compete, they're open to paying that player, but they're also not going to do that at the expense of the long-term team. That's the long-term goal, right? So that's going to be priority one. Priority two is compete this year, in the way that he said that. But the other comment that I took away from the payroll is that for people that have hinted before or said in the past that Bill DeWitt Jr. is ready to move on or get out and sell this team, I did not take that away from this comment today, because it did not seem like that in the way that he was investing and talking about long-term and talking about the payroll for this team, and the way that the third was talking about the business operations side of things tells me that Junior is still very involved on the baseball side.
Well, 3 years without a trip to the playoffs, 2 losing records in the last 3 years. Obviously, that's not where they want to be. The question, of course, will be how long will it take them to get back where 8 teams were on Tuesday, and that's playing game 1 of the wild card series around Major League Baseball. So it's always fun to watch postseason baseball, but it's hard to watch it on television and not in person at Busch Stadium.
It is tough. And the one thing that we had just talked about is in this postseason, you have 6 of the top 7 payrolls in the postseason. The only one not being there is the Mets. So there is some, truth to paying for your players gets you to win. But you look at some of these other teams such as Detroit and Cleveland, and their ability to create homegrown talent is where we used to strive, and we need to get back to.
And you also look up and see 3 teams that you're competing against every year in the National League Central: Milwaukee, Chicago, and Cincinnati, all in the playoffs. 2 as the wild card teams, 1 as the division champion. So the challenge is there. I mean, it's not going to be an easy fix.
And I think the hope is, as from Chaim's standpoint, is he looks up and says we have to beat 3 teams in this division, so we need to do a lot to do that. And I'm hoping that kind of lights the fire there in that, getting things going here in the offseason.
Yeah, I think it's going to definitely be an interesting offseason. I think it was a good start on Tuesday with his press conference, and I think he said all of the right things, and I think he's going to be good to have him in that role, and we wish him the best of luck.
The other takeaway that I want to say too, I wish Chaim the best of luck, and I hope it works out really well. But the other thing I want to hit on from the press conference today is what Bill DeWitt III talked about. I don't know if a lot of people understand this. He keeps talking about this entertainment district. So what they're doing is they're trying to pass this law, and I think it just passed, essentially creating an entertainment district between Enterprise Center, Busch Stadium, the soccer stadium, and I feel like there's one more. But regardless, what's going to happen is now there's going to be police officers that are designated to work that entertainment district when entertainment's happening. So when there's situations or things happening in downtown, they cannot pull those officers from that area. They're locked in there the whole time. So they're trying to create a bigger emphasis on safety and security to bring people back to the game too. And I think that's one step in helping that happen.
Yeah, he did acknowledge that part of the attendance drop-off was people who are concerned about safety, especially after night games. Also, of course, mentioning the ticket prices and the parking, and just how they tend to hopefully make it a little more user-friendly environment down at the ballpark. But knowing full well that the biggest way you're going to get fans back to Busch Stadium is by having a winning team on the field.
He did say that for sure. I just wanted to address the safety concern.
It is a factor. There's no question. Yeah. There's no question. Anything you can do to make it safer, I think everybody's going to be all for. I mean, I think it can only help.
And I think, obviously, first and foremost, a winning ball club is getting more people to come.
At least just a club that plays a good brand of baseball. Like Chaim said, we're going to be a hard work. We expect, our people expect us to be a hardworking organization that goes out there and does things the right way and tries to put a winning product on the field. And that's what we're going to try to do.
If you replaced this past season, if you replaced Miles Michaelis and not Miles, sorry, leave Miles there. If you replaced Eric Fetty and Andre Palante with another, let's just say Matthew Libator level, this is a playoff team. There's no doubt in my mind they win another 5 games to make the playoffs. So if you had a Sonny Gray caliber type pitcher and a Matthew Libator this offseason, they can be right there. Just a question of what bats they trade away from, but they're not far off, I don't think, either. And I think that's why they're saying they're more worried about the long term, but also wanting to compete in the short term.
It wasn't like a 100-loss team. It wasn't like they intend to be a 100-loss team next year and strip everything down to ground zero. So, I think that's an encouraging takeaway as well. Mike, thanks for the visit, reaction to the press conference. We'll be back with another edition of Reigns on the Cardinals podcast here shortly on stlsportspage.com. Have a great day, everybody.